The scent of distant shores, the air itself is a narrative, whispered by the currents that circle the globe. Long before kingdoms rose and fell, before stones were cut for great cathedrals, the world was already connected by invisible threads of desire and necessity. These threads were woven from fragrance and flavor, from the tiny, precious particles that we call spice. Close your eyes and imagine not just the taste, but the journey of that taste. The millennia of quiet human endeavor stitched across the land and sea. We begin not with a ship or a merchant, but with the very essence of the origin. In the deep green shadows where the rarest treasures of the earth first took form. This is the breath of the deep south, a place where the sun is fierce, yet the air is thick with the moisture of constant rain. Here, on the ancient island known as Taprobane, the Cinnamomum Verum grows, a shy, unassuming tree with leaves that hold a hint of its fury. Secret. This is where the story truly begins. Welcome and immersion. Welcome. Settle in, find your ease, and let the gentle rhythm of the distant past wash over you. Tonight, we are journeying far, traversing oceans and deserts, tracing the lines of ambition, risk, and immense profit. Our focus will be the quiet persistence of the spice roots, the network that bound the ancient world in a silent, continuous exchange. Allow the descriptions of sun-drenched harbors, the scent of exotic smoke, and the endless, soothing movement of the sea to carry you. Rest, relax, and let the world of ancient commerce unfold around you. The quiet cradle of spice we stand now in the 3rd century BCE. On a coastal plain near what will one day be called Gaul. The air is heavy, the kind of stillness broken only by the chirping of unseen insects and the distant, rhythmic crash of the Indian Ocean tide. The laborers moving through the cultivation plots are clad in simple, dyed cottons deep indigo from the coastal plants or sun-faded cream. Their movements are slow, deliberate, a choreography passed down across generations. They know the subtle art of the spice harvest. The most vital task is the peeling. It happens just after the monsoons have delivered their bounty, when the sap is running strongest. Imagine the sound. A low, quiet scrape. The sound of a small, curved bronze blade carefully separating the outer, corky layer oft young cinnamon shoot, revealing the soft, aromatic inner bark beneath. This is done with infinite patience, a meditative process. The aroma released is not the sharp, potent scent of the dried cinnamon we know, but a fresher, sweeter, almost floral perfume, mingling with the damp earth and the saline temps of the nearby ocean. The hands that perform this work are stained with the oils. A gentle ochre color that seems permanent. The peeled quills are laid out on woven mats in open, covered drying sheds. The light here is diffuse, filtering through the thatched roof, creating long, distinct shadows on the earth floor. The heat is consistent, gentle, not harsh. The drying is the critical slow kami. Over days, the thin bark begins its transformation. It curls, tightening like unancient scroll, becoming brittle, transforming from the soft inner layer into the hard, golden brown sticks of cinnamon. Now listen closely to the sounds inside the shed. Not the insects outside, but the sound of the drying spice itself. A faint, sporadic tick, ... pop, ... crackle, the minute exhalations of moisture leaving the organic matter. It is a slow, steady drumbeat of transformation. Outside, a gentle breeze rustles the broad leaves of a nearby palm, creating a low, shushing sound that is perpetually calming. A single woman nearby is stacking the fully dried quills into tight bundles, binding them with thin strips of coconut fiber. The sound of her hands working the brittle spice is a dry, rustling whisper, a sound of preparation for a vast, distant journey. The cinnamon is the first key. But our narrative also requires the fiery heart of pepper. We shift our focus slightly. moving across the narrow strait to the Malabar coast of southern India. Here, the landscape is greener, hillier, the rain more persistent. Papyrus, a climbing vine, needing support, winding around thick poles or nearby trees. Theaberries grow in hanging strings like miniature beads. They are small, bright green when first picked. When they are ready for harvest, the entire area is vibrant with the work. Imagine the smell here, the clean vegetal scent of the vine. Crushed leaves, damp soil, and the sharp, slightly acrid note of the pepper oil already beginning to exude. The sound of the harvest is distinct. The thwack of a farmer's hand pulling a whole string off berries from the vine. The soft thump as the clusters are dropped into a wide, shallow basket woven from reeds. The most beautiful sound, however, comes later. When the pepper berries are spread out to dry on large, flat, sun-baked courtyards, the sun here is an intense, unwavering forge. The green berries, exposed to this pure heat, begin their slow, irreversible change. Over several days, they shrivel, the outer skin contracting and darkening, turning from vibrant green to deep, rich black. This is where the world's most desired spice is born. The sensory experience of walking through this courtyard is complex, the blinding light reflecting off the stone, 38ing heat from below, and the smell of vast, encompassing aroma of freshly crushed pepper, dry and sharp, that catches in the back of the throat at midday. A farmer walks barefoot across the drying courtyard, using a long wooden rake to gently turn the thousands of berries. The sound this creates is a low, continuous self-ling and sifting, a vast, soft rush of dry matter being disturbed. It is a deeply soothing, repetitive sound, the music of ancient commerce beginning to awaken. This rhythmic work is a constant throughout the day, ensuring even drying, guaranteeing the patency that will soon travel thousands of miles. The gathering and the ships whence the spices are fully dried, packaged and secured the cinnamon in its bundles. The pepper in woven sacks, they must make their first great move, from the small villages to the major coastal intrepids. We follow the bundles of cinnamon as they air-loaded onto small river craft. The river is calm, almost mirror-like, reflecting the heavy, humid sky. The only movement is the slow, silent glide of the boat, pushed by a single, steady pulling motion. The plunge of the long bamboo pole into the muddy riverbank is soft, followed by the quiet swoosh as it is pulled back, water dripping off its end. The boats are laden, the air around them thick with the mingled aromas of the precious cargo. Cinnamon, maybe some cardamom, and the faint, sweet scent of tropical fruit grown along the banks. The journey upriver is deliberately slow, micro-paced by the physical limitations of seacraft and the winding nature of the water. This slowness is necessary, a time for thespuses to acclimate, for the air to cool and the moisture to settle into the fibers of thovan. Sachs. We are headed toward a major port, let us call it Muziris. Or perhaps Barigaza, a meeting place where the local world intersects with the vast unknown of the Mary Timurids. Arriving at the harbor is a sensory explosion, a deliberate increase in sound and activity that, nonetheless, retains a soothing, rhythmic quality. The sound of the port is a low, ceaseless hum, the creak and groan of heavy wooden hulls rubbing against the jetties, the continuous high-pitched cry of seabirds circling overhead, the rhythmic clank-clank of chains and ropes being handled by dock workers, the multilingual chatter of merchants, though it is a low, indistinct murmur, not sharp or jarring. Look closely at the docks. The wood is sun-bleached, splintered, worn smooth by centuries of traffic. Dust motes dance in the heat haze above the dry earth of the open stowage areas. The clothing here is infinitely varied. The simple cottons of the localibers stand next to the richly embroidered linen of a Greek merchant, the heavy, layered silk of a Chinese trader, and the rough, sun-faded wool tunic of a Roman factor. Each fabric tells a story of origin. of travel, of the distances that are about to be spanned. The smell is extraordinary. It is the composite scent of the world: salt, brine, fish, wet trope. The metallic temps of old coins, and, most powerfully, the spices not just cinnamon and pepper, but the sharper, resinous scent of frankincense and myrrh haribin from Arabia, and the earthy, sweet note of turmeric and ginger. This blending of aromas is the very atmosphere of global trade, a perfume of ambition. The waiting fleet and the monsoon wind-hour spices must now wait for the right wind. The journey across the Indian Ocean is no adventure of whimsy, but one of meticulous astronomical timing. This is the monsoon system, the clockwork of the ancient mariners. The ships are magnificent, built for the long haul. The typical vessel here might be a Narab dhow, with its distinctive triangular lateen sail, a silhouette of grace and efficiency. The wood of the hull is dark, treated with oils and resins. The rigging is simple, heavy rope, tied with knots that have been used by sailors for thousands of years. They sit heavy and low in the water, already laden with supplies and ballast, ready for the valuable cargo of spices. The waiting period is long. Imagine the slow passage of time under the tropical stars. The air at night is cooler, but still carries the residual warmth of the day. The on-like continuous sound is the slap, slap, slap of small waves against the wooden hulls, a constant rhythmic punctuation mark. Above the stars of the equatorial sky, aeroments, close and brilliant, providing the ancient mariners with the only reliable map they needed. The navigators on the deck are not reading charts, but reading the constellations, the tilt of the moon, the very temperature of the breeze. We are awaiting the southwest monsoon. This is the great breath, the shift of air that moves from the Indian Ocean toward the Arabian Peninsula and the east coast of Africa. It is the engine of the ancient world's economy. When the moment arrives, it is marked not by a sudden storm, but by a gradual, profound change in the atmosphere. The gentle land breeze that cools the port at night begins to falter, and a stronger, warmer wind starts to blow steadily from the ocean. Its direction fixed and reliable. The departure is a slow-motion cascade. One by one, the vessels cast off their mooring lines, the heavy splash of the lines hitting the water, the squeal of the anchor chains being hoisted up, the powerful, heavy flap of the large sails being unfurled and catching wind. These are the sounds of destiny setting sail. The initial momentum is provided by the oars. A steady oars in unison swoosh strip swoosh as the ships clear shallows. But once they are clear, the wind takes over. The feel of the open ocean is immediate and immense. The deck beneath your feet begins a constant, subtle roll. The sun is bright, reflecting off the vast, dark blue surface, off the water in dazzling, broken spears of light. The sound of the wind is now dominant, a deep, resonant roar as it pushes into the enormous sail area. The spices are now sealed away in the hold, resting in the cool, dark space beneath Thetic. Their journey has truly begun. For the next 30 to 40 days, this is thy existence, the constant rocking motion, the rhythmic creak of the ship's timbers, the taste of salt spray on the air, and the deep, pervasive odor of the sea mingled with their acidual scent of their own existence. The sea's immensity and the merchant's meditation. Imagine being a merchant, perhaps a Hellenistic Greek or a shrewd Arab trader, aboard of these vessels. Your entire fortune is below deck, hundreds of pounds of dried seeds and bark, each grain representing months of work, thousands of miles of transit, and a promised fortune at the other end. There is nothing to do but wait, observe, and trust the ancient knowledge of the captain. The open ocean is the epitome of soothing monotony. The horizon is an unwavering line. The deep blue of the water stretches out to meet the pale blue of the sky. The light changes constantly, yet the view remains the same. The sound is the endless gentleness of the hull slicing through the waves. The crew is efficient, moving with quiet, practiced steps. They communicate in low tones, often non-verbally, relying on gland-cessant gestures honed by years on the sea. This part of the journey is an exercise in patience. Days melt into nights, marked only by its shifting position of the sun and the rise of the moon. On certain nights, the sea becomes phosphorescent. Imagine looking over the railing, the black water churning at the bow, only to see it illuminated by millions of tiny living organisms, flashing a cold, pale blue and green light. It is silent illumination, a magical, continuous shimmer that underscores the mystery and power of the natural world that governs. This entire enterprise, the merchant sits, perhaps running a few small polished pebbles through his fingers. He is meditating on distance. The distance between the dense, humid jungle where the cinnamon grew and the sophisticated kitchens of Rome or Alexandria where it will buse. He thinks of the sheer, daunting logistics. Each pound of spice represents a chain of hands: the farmer, the peeler, the packager, the river pilot, the dock worker, and the mariner. The profit lies in the audacity of spanning this geography. The map of the journey is imprinted on the captain's mind, a sequence of currents and stars. This ancient understanding is the technology that makes the spice routes possible. The map illustration that guides our eyes is of aged, slightly wrinkled parchment, the lines of the coast delicate and hand-drawn. The ocean is rendered in a beautiful, deep indigo wash. It emphasizes the sheer scale of the water, the vast empty space that the small, fragile wooden vessels must cross, powered only by a temporary, reliable atmospheric current. The vulnerability of the journey adds to the value of the cargo. Every day at sea compounds the risk, and therefore, the potential reward. The air in the cabin below deck, where the merchant sleeps, is still and close, but permeated completely by the deep, complex scent of the cargo. It is an olfactory blanket. He sleeps soundly, rocked by the unceasing motion, protected by the virescence of the wealth he carries. The smells are heavy, the resinous, slightly smoky aroma of the Piper nigrum black pepper blending with the sweet, dry heat of the cinnamon. This passage is a slow distillation of value. Every nautical mile traveled, every degree of latitude gained, tightens the coil of tension and increases the final price of the spice. The Arabian shores, arrival, and transition finally. After weeks, the smell changes. The heavy saline air of the open ocean begins to acquire a faint, dry mineral scent, the unmistakable aroma of a vast, arid landmass. The color of the water changes too. From the deep sapphire of the open sea to a paler turquoise near the coast, we have reached the Arabian Peninsula. The landing itself is often chaotic but controlled. The sound of the gulls is replaced by the cries of land birds, and soon the sharp, distinct sound of human voices on the shore. The ships anchor in a protected bay. The rhythmic plunge of the anchor as it hits the water is a sound of immense real life and finality after the long sea passage. The port here is different from the humid, lush Indian coasts. Everything is drier, brighter, sharper. The shadows are hard and distinct. The buildings are pale stone, reflecting the fierce sun. The people are different, too clad in lighter, looser desert robes. Their faces weathered by the heat and the constant sand-bearing winds. The spices are quickly unloaded. This is a moment of intense activity. The woven saxair hauled up from the hold, swung onto the dock, and immediately counted, assessed, and recorded by meticulous local scribes. The sound of the counting is a low, rhythmic murmur, Arabic numbers being called out rapidly, followed by the dry scratch of reed pens on parchment. The cargo now changes hands. The Indian Ocean sailors and merchants have completed their leg. Now the task belongs to the desert people, the intermediaries who specialized in the even older, more dangerous and a more costly method of transport. The caravan, the sacks of cinnamon and pepper, are transferred into new, thicker specialized lags designed to withstand the abrasion of the desert journey. These bags are made of thick, coarse camel hair, woven tightly to protect the precious cargo from dust, sand, and the burning sun. The smell of the dock now shifts again, mixing the maritime salt with the sharp, unmistakable odor of camels, a dry, musky, earthy scent that signals the start of the overland route. The camels themselves are immense, patient animals kneeling in a long, obedient line, the dry earth, awaiting their monumental burden. The sound of this activity is entire line, the bellow of a camel being loaded, the dry, shushing sound of sand being kicked up by their large, padded feet, and the rhythmic thud of the heavy sacks hitting their broad backs. The wooden saddles creak loudly under the weight. This first leg of the spice route, the maritime passage from India to Arabia, is complete. The stage is now set for the next, even more ancient and mysterious movement. Our spices, having sailed the sea, are now destined to cross the silent, endless, sun-drenched sands of the Arabian interior, heading toward the markets of the north, the waiting empires of the Mediterranean. The contrast is profound. The easy, fluid movement of the ocean replaced by the slow, determined trudge of the desert caravan. We leave them now, poised for the inland journey, the last rays of the tropical sun giving way to the stark clarity of the desert night. The silent sands and the desert catalyst, the air has changed. The pervasive humidity of the spice-producing coasts, the smell of brine and damp tropical earth has been stripped away. Now, the atmosphere is thin, mineral, and dry, carrying the scent of pulverized quartz and ancient stone. We are deep in the Arabian Peninsula, and the journey has transitioned from the fluid, rhythmic motion of the sea to the slow, heavy, determined tread of the camel caravan. This shift is the great catalyst of the second act of the spice route, the transformation from a collection of goods into a hyper-valuable, guarded commodity. The ground beneath the camel's padded feet is not the shifting dune of common imagination, but a hard, packed gravel and sand mixture, baked solid by centuries of relentless heat. The only sound is the persistent, hypnotic squeak of the wooden saddle frames protesting the weight, the soft, muffled thud of the camel's massive feathening the desert floor, and the thin, high-pitched whistle of the wind catching the folds of the camel driver's robes. Each step is a deliberate, measured act. The pace of the caravan is the very definition of macro-pacing. It is slow, steady, and unyielding. The spices are carried inside thick, coarse woven bags, tied securely with ropes that are chafing the camel's thick hides. Beneath the coarse fabric, the cinnamon sticks and pepper grains are insulated, protected from the intense sun that beats down from an overhead sky of unrelenting, pale blue. The rhythm of the Marte massive caravan moves not as a single entity, but as a long, segmented serpent of life. There may be 50, 100, or even 200 camels in this train, each led by an experienced guide who knows the subtle, almost invisible landmarks of the desert, a rock formation, a specific arrangement of smaller stones. The bleached bones of an animal long since perished. The camel drivers are the heart of this movement. They are lean, efficient men, clad in layers of loose, natural fiber cloth, often undyed wool or linen, perfect for trapping errant, keeping the fierce heat away from the skin. Their movements are minimal. They conserve every drop of energy and moisture. They walk with a slightly forward lean, their legs adapted to the long, uneven stride demanded by the desert floor. Listen to the sounds of their existence. The quiet chanting, a low, monotonous, rhythmic song or prayer used not for entertainment, but purely to mark the cadence of their steps and soothe thin animals. The faint, metallic clink of a water flask bumping against a camel's flank. The deep, guttural sigh of a camel as it adjusts its burden. The smell is predominantly dry dust and the musk of the animals. But if a driver reaches into his satchel for a ration, perhaps a piece of dried date or a hard bread, a faint, sweet, and comforting aroma of dried fruit will briefly surface in the hot air. At the lead of the caravan is the Mukarib, the guide who holds the knowledge of Thewels. In this harsh landscape, water is the only currency that matters more than cinnamon or pepper. The knowledge of the oasis locations is the trade secret that justifies the exorbitant fees and the immense risk of this passage. The midday halt, sun and silence, the hours of the harshest sun, usually between noon and 3, demand a stop. The energy required to move in that intense heat is prohibitive. The camels are halted, and the long, weary line collapses into the sand. Imagine the sensation of stepping into the shadow cast by the makeshift canvas awning. It is not cold, but it offers a profound psychological relief from the punishing light. The desert air is so dry that the sweat evaporates almost instantly, taking the heat with it. The silence of the midday desert is absolute. It is a dense, physical silence, broken on Libby, the most intimate sounds of the resting caravan. The soft, continuous chewing of a camel, ruminating. The quiet, slow hiss of a man carefully pouring precious water from a leather skin into a small wooden cup. The quiet creak as a man shifts his weight on the hot sand. The spices are resting too. Beneath the saddlebags, they are absorbing the dry heat, perfecting their internal chemistry. The oils that give them their potent cinnamomum in the cinnamon, piperine in the pepper are concentrating, slowly increasing their value with every hour of exposure to this unique climate. The air immediately surrounding the spice bags is faintly aromatic, a promise of flavor sealed within the protective layers. The merchants, who travel alongside the drivers, use this time for necessary repairs. They might check the ropes, adjusting the bindings that secure the cargo. The tactile experience of handling the cargo bags is vital. They run their hands over the rough camel hair weave, testing for weak points or tears, feeling the reassuring bulk of Thewelth inside. The sensation of the coarse hair on their palms and fingers is a grounding grinder. Of the immense physical labor required to move these lightweight, high-value goods, the oasis, water, life, and fear the arrival at an oasis is the central pivotal moment of the desert crossing. It is the moment of replenishment and the moment of greatest vulnerability. The first sense to confirm the approach of the oasis is smell. A sudden, profound shifts from dry dust to the fresh, slightly sulfurous scent of deep, living water, followed immediately by the sweet, thick perfume of date palms and other clustered vegetation. The sound is one of immediate, chaotic relief. The camels sense the water and quicken their pace, their low bellows becoming more urgent. The men call out, a mix of relief and instruction. When they reach the water source, the sound of the camels drinking emanates a long, continuous, resonant sucking and guzzling sound, a testament to the desert's thirst. The water itself, drawn from deep underground, is often clear and cold, a shock to the system after the heat. The drivers wash the thick dust from their eyes and hair. The movement of the water over the smooth stone lip of the well or spring is a soothing, constant trickle, a sound of continuous life in a dead land. However, the oasis is also the catalyst for change and exchange. It is where different caravan routes intersect, where news travels, and where security is paramount. The concentration of wealth spices, gold, silk, and frankincense makes the oasis a target. During the long desert night, the security presence is quiet but pervasive. The sound off camp is muffled, the low murmur of conversations around small, smoky fires, the soft crackle of dry wood burning, the occasional distant howl of a desert animal. The guards move with slow, deliberate steps around the perimeter. The sound of their footsteps on the sand is a soft, continuous scuff. They carry long, simple iron spears or curved daggers. The merchant's sleep is light here, accompanied by the constant low-frequency presence of potential danger. Every shadow is watched. The high value of the freedman who has risen through the ranks, his tunic perfectly clean, his sandals wild. His job is the meticulous, relentless recording of every transaction. He works at Asmel's sturdy wooden table, dipping his reed pen into an inkwell made of polished bone. The sound of his pen is a rapid almost anxious scratching on a wax tablet or parchment roll. The record-keeping for the empire's economy, never ceasing. This is the point where the cost escalates dramatically due to the portorium thymeport duty. The empire demands its share. For the Romans, the spice routes, wearless a network of trade and more, a persistent, costly drain of Roman gold and silver flowing east, balancing the scales for the overwhelming desire for the small, potent treasures of the Orient. The Mediterranean Passage, Mare Nostrumda. Final movement across the sea is on the Roman Corbeada, the classic, rounded hull cargo ship. These ships are built for capacity and efficiency, not speed or beauty. They are blunt, powerful instruments designed to ferry grain from Egypt, oil from Hispania, and, crucially, spices from the Levant to the heart of Italy. The ship is slow, steady, and predictable. The Mediterranean is known for its sudden, violent squalls, but for now, the passage is gentle. The sound of the sea is different here, less the vast, echoing roar of the Indian Ocean, and more the closer, friendlier gurgle and slosh of waves against a massive hull. The primary sound is the deep, continuous hum of the large, square linen sail catching the wind, its heavy fabric vibrating gently. The crew are mostly experienced seamen, their hands tough and perpetually scarred by burns. They move with an economy of effort, performing the repetitive tasks off steering, trimming the sail, and checking the ballast. The spices are now deeply buried in the hold, resting beneath hundreds of other commodities. They are safe, protected, and nearing their final destination. Imagine a simple meal on deck. A few sailors are breaking bread and sharing wine, perhaps laced with a pinch of the cheaper spices, like cumin, to mask the flatness oft preserved meat. The cinnamon and pepper are too precious to be consumed by Thecamon sailor. They are an imperial treasure. The journey takes weeks. Skirting the coastlines, pausing at islands like Crete or Sicilito, take on fresh water or offload minor goods. The sea beneath a ship is a canvas off constantly changing blues and greens, reflecting the varying depths and the quality off light. This slow visual transition is deeply soothing. The movement is constant. Thepis unchanging. The arrival at Ostia, the gateway to Rome. The final destination for our cinnamon and pepper is the colossal, beating heart of the empire itself, the city of Rome, accessed via its immense port. Ostia Antica. Approaching Ostia is like approaching a machine built entirely of stone and human intention. The massive, engineered breakwaters, the immense warehouses, Theto Aring Lighthouse, everything speaks of an uncompromising demand for goods. The sound upon entry is overwhelming, a dense cacophony that nonetheless carries a kind of structured energy. The high-pitched shriek of gulls feeding on refuse near the jetties. The continuous clatter of heavy stone blocks being moved by teams of slave sand oxen. The distant, low roar of the city of Rome itself. An urban background noise carried on the wind. The urgent blows of horn signals, guiding incoming ships into their berths. The spices are unloaded onto the quays of Chrysos. They are moved into temperesturage, again subject to intense scrutiny and documentation. At this stage, they are likely repacked one final time into smaller, highly secure wooden chests or vermicures, ready for the 8-mile journey up the Tiber River to Rome itself. The act of sealing the chests is symbolic. The chest is heavy, made of dark, aged oak, bound with simple iron bands. The official uses a heavy bronze seal, heating the wax gently over a tiny flame until it is liquid, pouring it onto the knot of the rope that binds to chest, and then pressing the sigil firmly into the hot, viscous material. The smell of melting wax and the smoke of the small lamp is temporary and sharp. The seal is the final declaration of the commodity's supreme value and its imperial ownership into the city. Rome's Palatine hunger, the last leg of the journey, is along the river. A slow, gentle pull upstream by teams of oxen or men walking the towpaths. The river air is murky, carrying the smell of sewage-gened urban density. A complete contrast to the clean air of the ocean or the dry air of the desert. Upon arrival in Rome, the spices enter a world of staggering, opulent consumption. Their final destination is not a public market, but the specialized, secure vaults of the Haria Galba, the vast imperial warehouses near the Tiber, where the city's most critical and valuable assets were stored. These vaults are cool, subterranean, built of thick, unyielding concrete and stone. Theon-Lee light comes from the mouth of the entrance, filtering down into the perpetual semi-darkness. The air down here is heavy and silent, smelling only of stone and time. Thespices are now at the center of the world. The cinnamon and pepper are not yet consumed. They are waiting, protected, for Theko from the ultimate consumers, the wealthy senatorial class, the imperial household, and the city's most demanding cooks. Their use will not be casual. It will be a declaration of status, a display of distance traveled and wealth commanded, a sensory glimpse. The cooks are to understand the immense value of this journey. We must imagine the moment of use, a fleeting moment that justifies the thousands of miles of risk. We move to the kitchen of a wealthy Roman domus on the Palatine Hill. It is a large, smoky, intensely active space despite the early hour. The sounds are a mix of controlled chaos, the steady, low thumping of a pestle in a mortar, the sizzling of oil in a bronze pan, the sharp clatter of metal knives on wooden blocks. The chief cook, the Majoris, is preparing a feast. He takes a small, precise quantity of black pepper. The pepper is still in its dried, wrinkled form, but upon entering the dry heat and the smoky air, its oils begin to release. He pours the peppercorns into a heavy stone mortar. The sound of the dry seeds hitting the stone basin, a sharp click. He begins the grinding. The Majoris uses a heavy, smooth wooden pestle, working pepper slowly and rhythmically. The sound is a low, continuous, heavy thump-crush thump, a sound of transformation. The room is immediately filled with the sharp, clean, unmistakable smell of freshly crushed pepper. It is an aroma that cuts through the smoke and the smell of roasting meats. A powerful, pure scent of the far-off Malabar coast, instantly transporting the mind thousands of miles across sea and desert. Next, the cinnamon. He takes a single, brittle quill. He does not grind it, but instead breaks off a section, letting it steep in a jug of warm, rich wine, perhaps intended for the dessert course. The snap of the cinnamon stick is surprisingly loud, as the warmth of wine slowly begins to draw out the cinnamaldehyde. The air softens, becoming warm, sweet, and comforting, a deep, pervasive note of distant paradise. This, then, is the point of the entire enterprise, a single, sensory moment in a wealthy Roman dining room. A brief taste of the exotic that costs more than a common laborer's in a year. The journey of the spices into the heart of the consuming civilization is complete, ready to be deployed as a subtle, potent indicator of absolute power and command over global resources. The stage is set for the peak of this imperial demand, the time when the cinnamon and pepper are fully integrated into the culture and economy of the Roman world. Deep dive spices, the concentrated essence of distant lands, are now resting in the vaults of Rome, having completed the immense journey of the primary spice route. But the Cargo justifies this vigilance. These spices are not food. They are pure, concentrated lori, worth many times their weight in silver upon arrival. The northern push into the domain of empires after days of rest, replenishment, and perhaps minor trading with other groups at Theosis. The caravan continues its northern trajectory, slowly climbing in altitude and heading toward the vast, demanding empires of the Mediterranean, Egypt, Syria, and eventually the Roman sphere of influence. The terrain slowly transforms. The endless flat plains give way to rocky, escarmentioned, narrow, winding passes. The camel's footing becomes more difficult, the march more arduous. The sound of their massive feet is now mixed with the scrape of rock against rock. The wind here is cooler, sharper, carrying less dust but a greater sense of elevation. The drivers wrap their robes tighter. The spices, though silent and hidden, are traveling through the bottleneck of global trade, nearing the point where their value will spike exponentially. The final destination of this particular leg is a massive intermediary hub, perhaps a city like Petra, a staggering urban center carved into rose-red stone. This is where the local regional trade network of Arabia connects directly with the enormous, insatiable items of the Roman economy. Approaching, Petra is an architectural and sensory shock after the months of flat desert. The sheer scale of the stone carvings, the massive facades rising directly out of the cliffs, emphasizes the civilization that this wealth has built. This is not just a trading post. It is a fortified bank vault, a demonstration of the power derived from controlling the flow of goods. The air in the narrow gorge, the sick leading into the city, is cool and shaded. I'll come reprieve. The sound here is immense, echoing off the high stone walls. The clip-clop of the camel's hooves on the pavement, the amplified voices of the incoming merchants, the continuous, low grind of millstones from within the city all create a powerful acoustic atmosphere. Here, the spices are subjected to their first serious round of taxation and inspection. They are unloaded into massive cool stone warehouses, the Roman demand, the price of sensation for the Roman merchants waiting here. The spices are more than mere ingredients. They are status, medicine, and perfume. They represent the ultimate, expensive sensation that can be imported back into Rome or Alexandria. A Roman factor, draped in expensive, crisp white linen that symbolizes his distance from the dust of the road, inspects the pepper. He rubs a few grains between his fingers, testing their hardness, their density. He brings them close to his nose, inhaling sharp, pungent aroma. The tactile sensation of the small, hard peppercorns contrasts sharply with the smooth, cool stone of the warehouse table. He is assessing the potency, determining the quality that will fetch the highest price in the distant forum. He smells the cinnamon next. The sticks, now fully dried, are hard, brittle, and a deep, coppery brown color. He breaks a piece, the snap sounding sharp and clear in the quiet warehouse. The powerful, sweet, almost burning scent of the concentrated oil fills Thespace immediately. He is confirming that the journey has preserved the essential quality of the spice. The price negotiations begin. This is the moment where the risk, the sea voyage, Thiedsart crossing, and the immense distance are all factored into the final, stunning cost. The sound of the negotiation is a low, intense back and forth in Latin and Aramaic, accompanied by the careful, metallic clink of silver denarii being weighed on small Bren scales. The transaction is carried out with meticulous care. Every fraction of an ounce matters. The light from the oil lamps glows softly on the bronze and silver surfaces. The importance of the exchange is reflected in the complete silence that falls during final weighing. No one speaks until the balance is stable. The price agreed upon. Our spices are now firmly in the hands of the Roman economy. They will be repacked, perhaps broken down into smaller, more manageable lots, and prepared for the final, demanding leg of their journey, the movement into the vast Mediterranean trade network. The camel trains have fulfilled their role. The dust of the desert is shaken off, and the scent of the sea awaits them once more, but this time the familiar, calmer water of the Mare Nostrum, our sea. The caravan has been the catalyst, transforming a raw, distant product into an item of staggering, marketable value, poised to enter the heart of the ancient world's political and culinary center. We leave the spices resting in the cool, secure vaults of the great stone city, awaiting the carts and wagons that will carry them west toward the glittering, demanding harbors of the Roman Empire. Part 3. The Marble Ports and the Roman Taste. Journey now takes a pronounced western turn, shifting gears dramatically from Thessalo's organic pace of the desert caravan to the efficient, organized speed of the Roman infrastructure. Our spices, the cinnamon and the pepper, have survived the monsoon seas and the scorching sands. Now, they must navigate the complex, heavily taxed, and utterly voracious logistical machine of the Roman Empire. Moving through Syria and Dinto, the core of the Mediterranean world, the transition begins on the paved highways, engineered wonders that link the desert outposts to the coastal plains. The movement is louder, faster, and more mechanical than the previous legs. The smooth, rhythmic thudding of the iron-rimmed wooden wheels on the carefully laid basalt road stones is the dominant sound now. It is a constant, grinding rhythm, a sound of imperial efficiency. The spice bags are no longer carried by soft, padded camelbacks, but by hard, springless wooden carts, the motion jarring and relentless. The air here is no longer purely mineral. It carries the heavy, vegetal scent of cultivate fields, olives, grapes, grain mixed with the pervasive dust kicked up by the thousand soft travelers and the metallic temps of sweat and iron. The coastal emporium, Tyre and the purple dye. The cart journey is measured in stages, dictated by the positioning of the mansionese, the official posting houses, but the ultimate goal is the sea again. We arrive at a coastal emporium, perhaps the ancient, formidable city of Tyre, a place synonymous with wealth and vivid color. The harbor is immense, a basin of constant, loud activity. The sounds here are sharper than the muffled clamor of the Indian ports, the commanding shouting of the naviculary shipowners and their overseers in clear, clipped Latin, the continuous creak and splinter of heavy wooden cranes lifting cargo netzanto, the ships, the deep, echoing ring of a hammer on a metal fitting being repaired nearby, the perpetual, oily lap of water against the thick stone walls of the quays. The air, too, has a distinct, overwhelming coastal Roman smell, not just the sea, but the scent of garum fermented fish sauce and, in Tyre especially, the incredibly rare, slightly fishy, sweet scent of the Tyrian purple dye production. This intense color made from tiny marine snails was reserved for senatorial robes and imperial garments, symbolizing the absolute status that only immense wealth could purchase. The spices, though odorless in their sealed sacks, are traveling in the company of the world's other most valuable commodities. The spices are temporarily stored in a massive, cool, dry stone horium warehouse. The interior of these buildings is designed for long-term preservation. The air is still, dark, and smells faintly of lime mortar and dry grain. The sacks of cinnamon and pepper are stacked high, forming solid, fragrant mountains in the dim light. A Roman negotiator takes possession of the cargo. He is an official, perhaps. Narrative is not over. The journey now shifts from a physical transit across oceans and deserts to a deep, pervasive cultural absorption within the Roman Empire. This is the stage where the spices become fully integrated into Roman daily life, acting as silent, potent drivers of social status, medicine, and imperial ambition. This part delves into sensory details of Roman life and the pervasive influence of the expensive, Exotic cargo. The Roman domus is a world away from the dusty roads of the desert or the brine-soaked decks of the ships. The air here is often cool, drawn through the central atrium and circulated through thick stone walls. It smells of clean water, polished marble, and a faint, sweet scent of burning wood and expensive resins used as incense. The culinary display. Apicius and the peppered pig. Their consumption of spices was, first and foremost, a political and social act. To use the large quantities of pepper and cinnamon was a visual and gustatory declaration that the family had access to and commanded the resources of the entire known world. Consider a grand Roman Senna dinner party taking place in the late afternoon. Theateners are reclining on lavishly cushioned couches, their bodies draped in fine, oft-tendied wool and linen. The atmosphere is one of relaxed opulence. The sounds of the feast are central, the clinking of ceramic cups and silver plate, the low, amplified chatter of conversation, and the soft, constant plucking of a lyre player providing background music. A servant approaches with the main course, perhaps a perfectly roasted suckling pig, glistening with fat and honey. The meat has been cooked according to a recipe likely taken from the legendary Roman cookbook, Apicius, a text that relied heavily on the luxurious use of imported spice. The cook had previously prepared a condimento, a complex sauce. He would have carefully measured the black pepper into a bronze mortar, grinding it with vinegar, honey, dates, and a scattering of other local herbs. The sound of the pestle grinding the pepper in this context is deliberate and careful, the master chef prioritizing the quality of the sound as much as the quality of the flavor. The fine dust of the ground pepper, dark and potent, would have been carefully folded into the sauce. The serving of this dish is a slow, theatrical event. The servant takes a small jeweled spoon and gently drizzles the thick, dark sauce over the portioned meat. The aroma that rises immediately is complex and stunning. The heavy, savory smell of the roasted pork, the deep, sweet scent of the honey, and the sharp, powerful, almost shocking bite of concentrated pepper. This pepper is not a background note. It is the star testament to the distant Malabar coast. The smell lingers in the warm air, a constant reminder of the host's wealth and global reach. The cinnamon's dual life, perfume and preservation. The cinnamon, with its sweeter, more resinous profile, was used in equally significant, though often quieter, ways. It had a dual life as a perfume and as a powerful, ritualistic preservative in the private chambers of the Roman matron. Cinnamon served as a fragrance, replacing the heavy, localized scents of local herbs. It would be ground into fine powder and mixed with olive oil to create an expensive ungent. Imagine the matron sitting at her morning routine. A servant opens a tiny, precious glass flask, a balsamarium that contains the cinnamon unguent. The sound is subtle, the gentle, metallic scrape of the stopper being lifted from the glass neck, followed by the quiet swoosh of the oil being poured onto the servant's palm. The smell that instantly fills the immediate space is rich, warm, and comforting. The deep sweetness of the cinnamon, a smell of heat and faraway tropical rain. To smell of cinnamon in Rome was to carry the scent of the empire's ultimate trading success. Furthermore, cinnamon was crucial in the practice of medicine and embalming. The Romans, deeply influenced by Egyptian and Greek medical practices, used cinnamon for its supposed properties of preservation and purification. A Roman scholar might be reading a medical treatise by Galen, which details the use of cassia, a close relative of cinnamon and pepper, in compound remedies. The sound in the library is one of profound stillness, the gentle whisper of the parchment as the pages turned, the distant, muffled thump of urban life outside, and the intermittent, soft scratch of the scholar's stylus on a wax tablet as he takes notes. The scholarly investigation into the properties of these distant spices shows that the value was not merely economic or social, but deeply intellectual, incorporated into the very fabric of scientific and medical thought. The political and economic engine. The constant flow of gold and silver leaving the Roman treasury to pay for these spices was a source of persistent anxiety for imperial commentators like Pliny the Elder. Theft flow itself, however, was a profound economic engine that shaped the Roman periphery. The vast capital generated by the spice routes financed monumental construction projects in the trading hubs and the coastal cities that facilitated the transit. The wealth did not simply disappear. It built ports, paved roads, and financed armies. The map confirms the complexity of this vast web. The lines of transit are not random. They are meticulously plotted. The cost of the spices was high because of the toll takers at every stage, the South Indian kingdoms, the Arab tribal chiefs controlling Thedesart wells, the Nabatean authorities in Petra, the Ptolemaic and later Roman officials in Alexandria, and finally, the tax collectors in Ostia. Imagine the treasury official sitting in his office in Rome, watching the flow of speciati coin, the solid gold and silver. His table is covered in stacks of coins, each one a product of a distant mine in Hispania or Dacia, the sound of the coins being counted precise. Metallic jingle and clatter, the sound of wealth leaving the imperial heartland. The sheer volume of this precious metal drain underscores the power of a few dried seeds and bark to manipulate the economy of the world's most dominant empire. Daily life in the Eastern Hub, Alexandria. 2. Fully appreciate the spice route's impact. We must dwell for a moment in a critical hub city that managed the flow. Alexandria, Egypt. This city, with its vast library, multicultural population, and immense harbor, was the final gatekeeper between the Eastern riches and the Western consumers. The city's atmosphere is a mix of intellectual rigor and raw commercial energy. The air is thick with the smell of the sea, the dry dust of the nearby desert, and the strong, sharp aroma of papyrus being processed for the library's continuous demand in the agora. The main marketplace, the spices are not hidden in warehouses. They are displayed often behind glass or within secure cages due to their value. A small stall might be dedicated entirely to the sale of specialized goods, including the spices. Listen to the sensory details of a spice transaction here. The vendor, an Egyptian with a keen understanding of weights and measures, carefully opens a small ceramic jar containing a small batch of peppercorns. The subtle, dry sigh of air as the lid is lifted, releasing the contained aroma. The customer, a Roman official, leans in, breathing the scent, confirming thepency. The precise click of the small bronze balance scale as the tiny, precious Almatov spice is weighed out. The low, intense murmur of the negotiation in coin, Greek, or Latin. The tactile experience of the vendor is one of constant, detailed precision. He handled spice not as food, but as concentrated gold. The peppercorns are small, hard, and roll slightly on his palm. The cinnamon is brittle and sharp. He works with a quiet reverence for the extreme effort required to bring this small pile of organic matter from other side of the world to this exact spot. The social hierarchy of sensation, the use of spice reinforced Rome's strict social hierarchy. The very poor relied on local, simple flavorings, onions, garlic, cheap local herbs. The middle classes might afford small amounts of imported cumin or coriander, but only the absolute elite could afford the true spice masters. Cinnamon and pepper. Consider a wealthy senator walking through the forum. His toga is crisp, perhaps singed with the prized Tyrian purple. As he walks, the warmth of the sun on his skin releases the faint, sweet scent of the cinnamon oil he used earlier, an invisible, olfactory banner of his status. The sound of his passage is the soft flap of his expensive, leather sandals on the marble pavement, a sound of unhurried authority. The other citizens, clad in less luxurious materials, might catch that faint exotic scent and instantly recognize the invisible linear power that separates them. The scent of cinnamon is more than just a perfume. It is a social declaration. The pepper, in turn, was so valuable that it was often used as a form of currency, accepted in lieu of silver. The ultimate tribute to a victorious general or a successful emperor might include massive quantities of pepper stored in the imperial warehouses, a tangible measure of global control. The quiet, enduring power of the spice is its ability to act as a physical bridge between the extremes of the world, the humid jungles of the east and the cold marble halls off the west. It is a tiny, potent substance that drove ships, funded armies, and dictated culinary and social tastes of the world's greatest empire. This intense, continuous demand is the core of the narrative, the silent, relentless force that compelled the entire vast, ancient logistical chain into continuous motion, defining the shape and wealth of the Roman world for centuries. The Byzantine dawn and the Grand Exchange. The narrative now carries our spices, the essential cinnamon and pepper, out of the declining Western Roman Empire and into the glittering, complex, and highly controlled sheer of the Byzantine Empire, focused on its magnificent capital, Constantinople. This transition marks the climax of the ancient spice routes, where control over the trade became a matter of imperial survival, and the spices themselves reached the pinnacle of their geopolitical power and value. The move from Rome's older port cities to Constantinople's Golden Horn is a sensory escalation. The city is a fortress, a marketplace, and a living museum, all built on a strategic peninsula. The air here is cleaner than Rome, often swept by the winds coming off the Black Sea and the Bosphorus. It smells of the sea, clean stone, burning incense, and the perpetual, dense mixture of people and trade. The imperial grip, monopoly, and control by the 6th century CE. The spice routes had become a critical artery of Byzantine wealth. The emperors understood that controlling the flow of pepper and cinnamon meant controlling the currency of Western luxury and Eastern diplomacy. The trade was not free. It was a rigid imperial monopoly. The Byzantine system was characterized by intense bureaucratic oversight. The spices, having arrived from the Red Sea via Egypt or overland through Syria, were channeled directly into state-controlled depots and warehouses, often near the enormous Great Palace. Imagine standing within the imperial vestiarium, the state treasury complex. The air is cool and dry, preserving the invaluable goods. The only light comes from small high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing over the immense, sturdy chests. These sounds are muffled. The quiet shuffle of guards in heavy boots, the low, respectful murmur of the treasury officials. The spices are no longer mere cargo. They are a strategic reserve. The emperor and his officials dictated every step: who could buy, who could sell, and at what inflated price. The profits did not just enrich private merchants. They funded the vast Byzantine military, the elaborate court ceremonies, and the construction of monumental churches like the Hagia Sophia. The tiny peppercorn and the Fragilissimum quill thus became the silent, potent foundation of the state's power. The mystique of the spice market, despite the state monopoly. The final distribution occurred through regulated market spaces, allowing the wealthy and the privileged access to the treasures. We visit a section of the Mazy, the main thoroughfare of Constantinople, near the Forum of Constantine. The spice market here is a sensory marvel. It is not loud like a general market, but possesses a deep, pervasive aromatic density. The air is heavy with the mingled scents of high-value goods, the smoky richness of frankincense, the pungent sweeterness of saffron, and the sharp, clean heat of the pepper and the cinnamon. These aromas blend into a single, overwhelming perfume of opulence. The merchants, known as myropsoi perfumers, spice dealers, are meticulous and secretive. The spices are kept in carefully sealed containers, often small, intricately painted ceramic jars or glass vials to prevent adulteration and preserve the volatile oils. Observe a merchant handling the pepper. He uses a pair of small, delicate bronzed tweezers to lift a few black peppercorns, placing them on a small piece of fine white linen for inspection by a customer, perhaps a wealthy court eunuch. The sound of theine, hard seeds being placed on the fabric, is a soft, precise tink. The transaction is one of quiet, intense assessment. The buyer is not just purchasing flavor. He is purchasing purity and distance. The cinnamon is often sold in its preserved quill form. But sometimes, for the wealthiest, it is sold already ground into a fine, reddish powder stored in tiny stoppered glass vials. The sound of a customer carefully tapping the bottom of a vial tube serve. The consistency of the powder is a muted, expectant tap-tap. The imperial kitchen and the spice art in the grand kitchens of the great palace. The spices were used not just for flavor, but as a deliberate demonstration of the emperor's ability to command global resources. The cuisine of the imperial court was famously complex, rich, and heavily seasoned. A fusion of classical Roman and Eastern influences. The kitchen is immense, filled with the continuous, loud roaring of the massive stone hearths and ovens. The steam is thick, carrying the smell of roasting meats, boiling grains, and rich reduced sauces. Amidst this chaos, the spice master works with quiet, surgical precision. He is adding the finishing touches to a palmentum, a rich, savory stew. The black pepper is used liberally, not just for heat, but for its sharp, clean profile that cuts through the fat of the meat. He measures it not by eye, but by a tiny, calibrated silver spoon, emphasizing the value of every grain. The sound of the fine, dark powder softly dusting the surface of the stew is a quiet contrast to the roaring fires. The cinnamon, meanwhile, might be used in a complex sweet wine, or a dessert ophony in cheese. A cook is carefully breaking a brittle quill and dropping the fragments into a glass decanter of warm wine. The snap of the cinnamon is crisp. As the warm wine begins to draw out the scent, the air around the decanter fills with these sweet, soothing aroma. A counterpoint to the savory spices used elsewhere. The entire process is a silent, ongoing performance, showcasing that the emperor eats, breathes, and consumes the wealth of the East. The sensory experience of the Byzantine dinner, the intense, complex flavors, the pervasive aromas was an act of political theater, all enabled by the successful, highly managed logistics of the spice routes. The price of a pound, gold and legacy, the financial climax of the spice route is best understood by the price. By the height of the Byzantine period, the cost of spices like pepper and especially cinnamon was staggering, rivaling gold. The price was driven up by the risk of the long journey, their repeated taxation, and the final state-imposed monopoly price.